Aloha mai kako. Welcome to our webinar today, Recentering Healing for Native Hawaiians. My name is Lisa Leilani Ka'anoi, and I'm the engagement specialist for Mauliola Ma Lama Lama, which is the Healthcare Workforce Development Center at Papa'ola Lokahi, which is the Native Hawaiian Health Board. And just to let you know that this is being recorded, and as long as you registered, you will receive the recording. And just as an FYI, if you're interested in our future webinars and you're unable to make it, just as long as you register, you will also, you'll still receive the recording. For today, you can use the Q&A feature or the chat feature for questions, comments, or feedback. And again, for future presentations, if this is your first time, welcome. You will be added to our email list for future presentations. And for those that are returning, welcome back. And at the end of the webinar today, there will be a survey that pops up. And this is where we get ideas for future webinars. Now, if you do have to run and don't feel like you want to fill out the survey out afterwards, that's okay. We'll check back on Monday and see if we can get feedback then, if that helps. So before we get started, I would like to actually have us start off today's webinar with an ʻŌiwi by Lilinoe. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Lilinoe.
Actually, can we take maybe a few collective breaths together, kind of just maybe center and ground ourselves. It's hanumai, breathe in. Hanuaku, breathe out. Hanumai. Hanuaku. Hanumai. Hanuaku. E ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. Una mea una nueo. Una mele. E ho mai. E ho mai. E ho mai e, ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. Una mea una nueo, una mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e, ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. Una mea una nueo, una mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai e.
All right, mahalo Lilinoe. I would like to introduce Lilinoe Kauahikaua. She uses she, her, oia pronouns and is from Pi'ihonua, Hilo on Moku'okeawe or Hawaii Island, but has lived and grown in many other spaces throughout her journey, including Oahu, California, and Arizona. She is a 2021 graduate of the Masters of Social Work program at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and now serves as a population health specialist with Papa'ola Lokahi, focusing on addictions, behavioral mental health, and social justice. Her research focuses include data disaggregation and Indigenous approaches to behavioral mental health, re-entry services, incarceration, and substance misuse. She also received her BA in Administration of Justice with a minor in Hawaiian Studies from the University of Hawaii at Hilo, along with a certificate in Hawaii Lifestyles from Hawaii Community College. Lilinoe was appointed by Governor Ige to the Hawaii Advisory Commission on Drug Abuse and Controlled Substances and serves on the boards of Ekolu Mea Nui, Going Home Hawaii, and Kinohi Mana Nui. and as the Cultural Committee Co-Chair for the Going Home Hawaii Consortium. Organizations serving the Native Hawaiian community, also organizations serving the Native Hawaiian community impacted by incarceration and substance misuse. Lilinoe also serves on committees for the Institute of Violence and Trauma and Hawaii Substance Use Professional Development Initiative. She received the kahea to return home and serve her lahui over 10 years ago and is committed to pursuing social justice for the Native Hawaiian community. She also enjoys singing, going to the beach, cultural learning, and spending time with ohana and friends. And on a side note, one of her favorite sweet treats that she enjoys are poi mochi donuts. So I'll go ahead and give it to you, Lilinoe.
Mahalo, Lisa. It's so weird to hear like my bio read out loud. Still getting used to that. So aloha mai kako. Mahalo to Lisa and our Mauliola Lama crew for inviting me to speak with everyone today. I'm really excited to kind of share some of the work that Papola Lokahi has been doing in this area of substance use. And so just a little bit about me. Actually, she already read pretty much everything about me, so maybe I don't need to, but I will say, I will share a little bit about my usual introduction. So, o Lilinoe Kauahikaua, ko'inoa, no pi'i honua, maiau, o mauna wa kia ku'u mauna, o wailuku ku'u wai, ia ku'u mau kumu, aloa'a kiola ka halawa ola. So my name is Lilinoe Kauahikaua. As Lisa mentioned, I'm from Pi'i Honua in Hilo on Mokuo Keawe. Mauna Kea is my mauna. That's my my mountain source that I connect to, and the Wailuku River, which is the river that runs through Pi'i Honua. That's my water source, and those are the sources that have grounded me and continue to help me on my own healing journey from substance use. And so the olelo no ia that I also usually bring into my introduction, lo'a kiola i ka halaola. So that that olelo no ia refers to Hi'iaka's journey as she's going to fetch Lohi'au. The halaola is a space where she brought Lohi'au back to life. And so I like to utilize that. Actually, my kumu hula gifted that as a way to kind of bring in my own healing journey, which has very much been grounded in returning home to Hilo and returning and reconnecting to that wahi, to that space, and reconnecting to culture and learning history about our people. And culture very much saved my life. And so I'm really grateful now today to be in the place that I am, to be working with an organization like Papola Lokahi, and to be able to serve the lahui. So now I'm a population health specialist with a special focus on addictions, mental health, and social justice, which is right now covers incarceration and reentry. And I also serve as the program coordinator for the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Ohana Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health. And I'm really, again, grateful to be a part of this work with Papola Lokahi. As a person with lived experience, as being on my own healing journey from all of the areas in which I focus on, I'm really grateful that Papola Lokahi has been such a champion for voices of lived experience at the table. And so, yeah, I'm excited to share some of this information. As Lisa mentioned, we are Papola Lokahi, the Native Hawaiian Health Board. We're authorized by the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Improvement Act, which was originally passed by Congress in the late 80s. And so our mandate is to really raise the health status of Native Hawaiians and their families to the highest possible level. And then we do this through strategic partnerships, programs, and public policy. And so some of our kuleana is to, again, we serve Native Hawaiians and their families, and we serve these populations throughout the country. So we know that now there are more Native Hawaiians on the continent than there are here in Hawaii. And so it's really important for us to be able to reach our kanaka wherever they may be, in order to provide that connection to culture and to health the best that we can. And so here's some of the other departments that are in our organization. And then we also oversee the Native Hawaiian healthcare systems, which actually probably everyone on this call is more familiar with. But and there's one on each island. And then we have the scholarship program, which is the scholarship. And yeah, Lisa, I always put this in my presentation, so we can be sure to spread the word about the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship and the Kāko'u Oihana availabilities for folks. So onto kind of the meat of what I was hoping to talk about today. So whenever we're kind of, going to share about some of these heavy issues, right? I always like to open up with Oli so we can kind of set our intentions, center and ground, and make ourselves open and able to, ingest all the information. We also like to start from a space of strength to look at our people and look at our past, really, to provide guidance for our future and how we want to move forward. So our ancestors, they arrived in Hawaii somewhere between 300 and 1200 CE, really navigating using their knowledge of celestial bodies, of the stars, and really their own kilo, right? Their own observations of the ocean, the weather, birds, moon phases. Our ancestors built a thriving, healthy, ohana-oriented society. They built complex systems of resource management through the ahupua'a, because they knew that the resources on Hawaii in Hawaii were finite, right? And so this concept of malama aina, our caring for the land, grew this reciprocal relationship between our kanaka, our aina, and really caring for one another as ohana. And so prior to European contact, Native Hawaiians understood really that our health had to be within this balance, right, between the mind, body, and the spirit, as well as on a larger level between individual, families, or communities, along with environment and spirituality. So if we take this kind of a worldview into account, this balance is really fundamental to maintaining optimal health for Kanaka Maoli. With Western influence and colonization started to trigger this imbalance in our society, shifting the paradigm of Native Hawaiian family systems. Then historical, cultural, and other intergenerational traumas that stemmed from that impact of colonization, and then also the criminalization of the Native identity, have then affected each subsequent generation. And so the outcomes of these traumas are really reflected in higher rates of health disparities and overrepresentation across all social service areas, including mental health, addiction, incarceration, and all of these issues, which then have a significant impact on the individual, the ohana, our keiki, and our community health. And so a lot of the time in the health arena, our populations are described according to our health disparities, but our work with Papulalokahi is really to shift this conversation to focus on us as a thriving people that are grounded in our strengths and grounded in our Hawaii. But we also have to acknowledge those moments of like hurihia, right, of our transitions and the things that we have gone through in our history. So throughout generations, many of our Native ohana have really fought to reclaim their Native identity and their cultural practices, but we still have many ohana that remain disconnected from their cultural heritage. And we saw a lot of this real hunger for connection, right? Like when things were folks were gathering on the mauna, right? It was this reawakening of mana for so many people. So a lot of these ohana carry with them different intergenerational, cultural, and historical traumas that stem from colonization. And then we add on top of that further layers of complexity that are really added by like the loss of land and these really abrupt lifestyle changes, like from going from like subsistence living, right, in the ahupua'a fishing and doing things that are subsistence living, into a more capitalistic kind of environment. And so the ramifications of that kind of shift have then created these really stark socioeconomic differences between Native Hawaiians and then our Western counterparts. And then these stark differences have then also in turn led to generations of poverty and houselessness, substance use, mental health issues that still continue today. So although these intergenerational traumas really have led to many of these issues that we see today, we also know that our people carry with them intergenerational strengths. And so their strengths are rooted in our values, our beliefs, and practices that have been passed down by our ancestors. And so I always like to kind of take a look at the social and cultural determinants of health. This model was the work of Dr. Kauahikaua. And so the social determinants are conditions in the environment where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, exist, that really affect this wide range of health and the quality of life kind of outcomes, right? And so when we add to this culture, social determinants of health and culture really has to be considered hand in hand. Culture is equally, if not more important piece for Kanaka to really achieve that optimal health. And so this cultural kind of perspectives can include factors like traditional healing practices, indigenous ways of knowing, doing, being, and other kind of cultural perceptions of self and other cultural types of complexities that have often not been taken into account in the design of some of the programs in the areas of substance use and mental health and incarceration. So in order to improve these health outcomes for Indigenous communities, we really have to be sure to include cultural determinants of health. So I really love this model that was created by Dr. Kauahikaua. And so the issues kind of outlined within the social cultural determinants of health have then impacted the Maliola and reached across generations of Hawaiians. And so you'll kind of notice within these social cultural determinants of health that they're not all negative, right? There are also many positive things, and they can kind of impact one another. Okay. And so when we kind of take a look at some of the ways that the impacts of colonization and these types of trauma have shown up within our Native Hawaiian population. So substance use and incarceration have really emerged as these areas of focus for Papua since this issue has disproportionately impacted Native Hawaiians on many different levels. And so we see in our youth that they're showing higher rates of ever having used substances than US youth. And in some cases, it's almost double the rates. So that's a concerning number. We have disproportionate numbers of our Native population consistently overrepresented for the past 2 decades among those who are really seeking or being thrust into Western treatment for substance disorders. And so you can kind of see this dotted line here is the percentage of the Hawaiian population of Hawaii, and these bars represent Native Hawaiians that are in ADAD treatment services. So this number doesn't even take into account those who are not seeking formal treatment within ADAD systems. We have higher incidences of behavioral health issues, higher prevalences of depression, and higher suicide rates within our populations. We also see overrepresentation throughout the past decade and beyond within the incarcerated population. So current numbers from public safety reflect that about 40% of those incarcerated are Native Hawaiians. However, we do have some reports of those who work within the facilities that actually report the number is probably closer to 80%. And that kind of has a lot to do with the way that public safety collects their data. They ask folks to only choose one ethnicity when they're being during intake. And in some cases, they may just mark an ethnicity down. So that really kind of doesn't allow for many of us here in Hawaii that have multi-ethnic identities. Choosing one ethnicity is not an accurate way to kind of represent that data. So we also kind of see this 80% number reflected in those accessing reentry services as well. So that's kind of another clue that, the number in the facilities is probably much, much higher than 40%. We also found that between 30 and 40% of Native Hawaiian admissions into the ADAD treatment were referred via the criminal justice system. And of those getting treatment for substance use disorder, 48% indicated that methamphetamine is their substance of choice. And this is important to note because a lot of the trends on the continent really focusing on opioid use as being the predominant issue across the continent. Here in Hawaii, methamphetamine remains the largest issue, with about 4% reflecting that opioids were their primary substance of issue. And so here's just a quick snapshot of some of the work that we've done in this area. And so I presented the data because it's important to note, but it also is important to note that the data really only tells us part of the story. And so when we look at this, we can kind of see this is our way of trying to fill in the rest of the story, right? So ʻiʻola came out in the early 90s. It was the early 80s, sorry. It was a Native Hawaiian health needs assessment, and it really provided these across the board recommendations in policy, research, and data, programs, services, education, healthcare, and workforce development. And then it also provided guidance to local, state, and federal agencies on how they could contribute to the health and well-being of Native Hawaiians. We have another version, ʻiʻola Mau, which is an updated version of the Native Hawaiian Health Needs Assessment that was just released recently. And you'll find, I think we put in the chat there, links for you folks to check out some of these reports. ʻimikiʻola Mau was a report that came out in 2007. It was a strategic plan for the improvement of substance use and mental health outcomes for Native Hawaiians, their families, and communities. This is really a visioning process of kupuna, which actually offered this quote here above that I like to kind of preface this through. Native Hawaiians look to the past when determining visions. We incorporate the past, present, and future to convey who we are, our sense of place, where we come from, and what is our kuleana. When we fulfill that kuleana, we will be well. And so this strategic plan that was released really created these ways for us to kind of address these needs within our populations for both substance use and mental health, and those that are co-occurring. And I'll share a little bit more about this report in just a moment. And then we have our Hawaii Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division State Plan. Papololokahi was asked to contribute a chapter that addressed the needs of Native Hawaiians within these systems. So we offered this chapter that is entitled Conceptualizing Care for Native Hawaiians and Substance Use. Part of this project with the state was also to contribute an article within the Hawaii Journal of Health and Social Welfare. Through both of these projects, we were able to bring in varying recommendations on various levels of how to create systems that are more culturally responsive within the existing systems of care, but also what it would look like to have a system of care for Native Hawaiians that actually was designed for Native Hawaiian practices to thrive within. And so I'll share more about that in a moment too. And then we have our phase 1 and 2 reports on our community listening sessions that we held throughout Hawaii. And so we did these, we had 2 phases. We did the first phase online, and then we did the second phase actually in person. We got to go and meet with folks, and I'll share some findings from those reports too. And so these are all examples of a collective effort to really continue building a sustainable, culturally resonant care system for Native Hawaiians and their families and communities who are experiencing these issues around substance use and mental health. Is there a question? Sorry, I kind of saw. Yes, I can make these slides available. Okay, so I'm gonna share a little bit about ʻimikiʻola Mau. So ʻimikiʻola Mau, I'm gonna read some of the strategic visioning because this really frames kind of all of the work that we do in this area. So ʻimikiʻola Mau was the inoa gifted by Hulu Kupuna Auntie Malia Craver, and it translates to perpetuate a life of health and healing. And so their foundational work through this report brought together countless Native Hawaiian organizations and kupuna, really paved the way for this work in the decades prior. And so we use this as our own strategic visioning and the foundation for our work moving forward. Okay, and some of the quotes that we use here on the screen: we need a sense of place, which provides, so in order for Native Hawaiians to heal and recover from substance use and mental health issues, we need a sense of place, which provides anchors for our values and balance in life. We need immediate access to and availability of safe, healthy environment, which includes all the natural elements such as kai, vai, freshwater, air, aina, land, and all of the animate and inanimate aspects of nature, which make up this physical environment. To heal, we need more than just Western practices, such as motivational interviewing, for these practices are not what is going to make our people well. The motivation comes from caring for our sources, the aina, and the reward is our own wellness, which we perpetuate in all our relationships through caring for the aina. We need the resiliency and protection our culture provides in order to prevent relapse and redefine ourselves away from pathological diagnosis. We need a sense of self, retrieved from our past through ancestors, present through purpose, and future through our descendants. We need our language, our traditions, and ceremonies, which provide ways to connect and reconnect our spirituality to our concept of source. We need our land and other natural resources, our language, our aumakua, our kupuna, our ohana, and our roles as parents, children, and we need not become Western to heal. And so that really frames our work in this area. We also worked on this model here, which is the ahupua'a model. And so this is our way to kind of envision what our kupuna shared through the Imikeola Mau report. Also bringing in aspects of Dr. Keawe Kuholokula's social and cultural determinants of health. Also, this model was heavily influenced by White Bison and their model of the healing forest. And so we wanted to embody this model within the ahupua'a as a way to kind of connect to our kanaka ways of knowing, doing, and being. And the Western continuum of care is really siloed and targets interventions for the individual. And that is often not resonant and not effective for Native Hawaiian communities who have a very different understanding or perception of the self, which is more tied to our relationships to one another and to the land. And so in this model, we've kind of taken the social and cultural determinants of health and embodied them up here in the ua and the risk factors and protective factors. And they're here symbolically in the ua to represent the way that intergenerational transmission takes place, intergenerational traumas, but also intergenerational strengths. So when we look at the intergenerational transmission of a lot of these risk factors, like historical, cultural, intergenerational trauma, discrimination, criminalization of Native identity, colonization, loss of land, dismantling Native practices, childhood trauma, acculturation, family history of substance use or incarceration. And these intergenerational risk factors begin to impact all of our systems because the ahupua'a, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, if you're not, it is a land division that runs from the mountain to the sea. And within this system is all of the resources that our people would need to live. And all of these resources within this ahupua'a are connected by water and connected to the health of one another. If one system is not healthy, then all the systems are not healthy. So as our risk factors start to go through our aina here through the water cycle, they impact the soil, they run off into the kahawai, they're carried down into our lo'i, into our mala, into all of these different systems, into our lokoi'a, our fish ponds, and back out into the ocean. They're evaporated back up, and then they fall down again as ua. And so when we look at how this has impacted our systems, and as these start to impact the soil, they start to create an unhealthy soil for things to be grown out of, right? And so let's look specifically at the lo'i. And as we think about the kalo, our little baby kalo, that's kind of a reflection of ourselves, right? So this reflection of ourselves, and this ties into our creation stories of Papahanaumoku and Wakea, right? Sky Father. And so Papahanaumoku and Wakea come together and Papa births the islands. And one daughter named Ho'okukalani and Wakea come together, and she bears a son, Haloa, who is stillborn. And they bury Haloa, and from his body springs the kalo plant, the taro. She has another child, also named Haloa, very long names, different Haloa names, but long name. And so Haloa is then the ancestor of the Native Hawaiian people, and our people are sustained on the kalo, which came from his older brother's where his older brother was buried. And so from that story, that shows us the reflection, right, of ourselves in the kalo, of this is our familial connection, our root, that which sustains our people. And so when we think about this, the potentially unhealthy soil that our kalo is now coming out of, it starts to create these issues, as we have then these generations of our people that come up through this unhealthy system, or these unhealthy risk factors that could be buried down deep inside of them, and they may not really even know, right? That's the way kind of some of this intergenerational trauma works. And so the way that we start to see this manifest on the surface is substance use, mental illness, violence, child abuse. Some of these issues, these are the manifesting symptom of a much deeper trauma. And so in order to remedy this, we have to kind of look at how these sickness or these risk factors are getting into our systems. If we have one little kalo here that's sick, we cannot just, we got to look around it, right? Are the other kalo sick? Is the whole lo'i sick? How is this sickness getting in? We have to look up the ʻŌiwi, up these water systems, up through all of these water systems to try to see where is this ma'i, where is this sickness coming in from? And if we don't do that work, if we just decide, hey, we're going to take this one kalo out, we're going to go ahead and heal it, we're going to throw it right back in. That kalo is only going to get sick again because we haven't done anything to heal that ohana, that community, anything around that lo'i. And so that's kind of what we see right now, what's happening with our folks that are going into treatment. They're being, the way that their health is being addressed by the Western system is that they're focusing on the individual rather than the relationships that person is going to be back into. And so just like our intergenerational traumas go through our systems in a cyclical way, so do our intergenerational strengths, like our community, our environment, our ohana relationships and the support, cultural knowledge, kupuna, aina, cultural healing practices, mo'oku auhau, and other intergenerational wisdom. And these cycle through our systems in a very similar way, but are often, overwhelmed by the risk factors that create that eha, right? That create that pain. And so as our goal is to create, or not to create, but to uplift what is already happening in communities, which are very much rooted in our relation to aina, these cultural practices. These cultural practices can live within this ahupua'a system in an effort to clean the wai, right? Because that's what we do. We steward our spaces, right? We malama aina, and through that process of malama aina, through our cultural practices, we can clean the wai and make more space for our protective and resiliency factors, which then create a much healthier soil and our happy, healthy little kalo that begin to come out of those spaces. And so I was going to share a little bit about, checking the time here, 10:30. Okay, so I was going to share that model is in our chapter within the state plan. And we are very excited to have it within the state plan because it provides a space for us to really advocate for the need for systems that support cultural intervention, right? Cultural ways of healing, indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being. That's where we need to advocate for the most, especially within state systems. Because they have, there's often a real disconnect. And when we work with the state, it really is kind of a complicated relationship, right? We sometimes want to huli the system, but then we also think about our kanaka that are in the system, right? And they can't get out of the system. So how can we help our kanaka in that space as well? So we have to kind of walk in all of these spaces the best that we can. And through our work with the Hawaii State Alcohol and Drug Abuse Division on their state plan, they reached out to subject matter experts of specifically high-risk populations. And then we were able to offer selections that really provided recommendations on how to best serve Native Hawaiians at various levels within this current system, maybe half huli the system, and then a full huli of the system. So we're really excited to have been a part of that. And so what we kind of found was there was some existing treatment spaces that provided cultural healing opportunities through substance use treatment, but they were often had to kind of maintain these two separate funding sources. So through the ADAD treatment, they often weren't able to get funding for the cultural services. So because of that, they also may not have reported on the impacts of the cultural services on the clientele. And then many had to kind of maintain this other outside funding source in order to support the cultural intervention. So we're not able to see, we can see because we know that these cultural interventions are what's working for our people, but it just creates this disconnect. And then folks are having to maintain these two different paths, and they shouldn't have to. They should be able to address healing in a holistic way, all the way around. And so, this term evidence-based, that is a buzzword for, especially for Western treatment, but our indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being have existed way before Western evidence had, Western evidence was, this term of evidence-based was even created. So it's really, we have a lot of work to do in this area to show, not that we even need to show, but just to uplift within our own communities what's already working, because that is the knowledge that's been passed down by the ancestors and it has worked for our people. And then as we started to reconceptualize this system of care, we identified the parallel strengths and the detrimental differences, again, of like treating the individual from a Western perspective versus what the cultural perceptions of self are for indigenous folks, which are more rooted in like ecocentric, sociocentric, cosmocentric. So ecocentric is a connection to the land. Sociocentric is our connections to our one another, our families, our communities. And then cosmocentric is a connection to the lani, the cosmos. And so we've kind of looked at that. And then cultural safety, really creating a culture of cultural safety for Native Hawaiians that are accessing services, as well as our Native Hawaiians that are providing services. So cultural safety, even within supervision structures within the system. So no one should ever have to check their Hawaiianness at the door, right? So that's what we're saying. We need to create that cultural safety as a culture itself. And then culturally focused intervention. So we kind of looked at the varying levels of cultural intervention. So we have cultural grounded, which is grounded in, so this is the deep structural cultural, culturally grounded. So let's utilize methods that place the culture and the social context of the targeted population at the center of the intervention. And then the intervention is then founded upon the cultural components. And then we have deep structural cultural adaptation, which use systematic methods to infuse the unique cultural worldviews, beliefs, values, and behaviors of a population. And so here the intervention alters its original model to add cultural components. So we focus mostly on the culturally grounded, and then sometimes the deep structure cultural adaptation, depending on what the needs are. But this last level, non-adaptation, surface structure, cultural adaptation, we do not advocate for, because this is kind of provides changes like images or phrases throughout the content and lessons in order to align the program with more like similar concepts. So this is like taking a Western intervention and then just kind of sprinkling some Hawaiian words on top of it. So we do not feel that that is an effective way to address these issues. And so this work comes from Okamoto's review of these different culturally focused interventions and has been really helpful in our conversations and our advocacy with state systems for how to best serve Native Hawaiians. And so the areas that we focus on, again, are cultural safety, targeting an understanding of a Hawaiian view of ma'i, or sickness, indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being, and uplifting community voice. Communities know what is working. And so the interventions that we start to reimagine, we ground them in our Aina-based models like the Ahupua'a. And if you folks are familiar with the Kanilehua framework through Mapuna Lab, they also do incredible work with that Aina-based model. Also focused on practice-based evidence, and this is our kind of way to address the evidence-based practice that is always advocated for. We advocate for practice-based evidence because, again, our folks have been doing this for forever. And then we also have some work that exists within the class system, the culturally and linguistically appropriate services, which are frameworks that are designed to support cultural intervention. And so when we look at the way to address healing we see the continuum of care more like this, right? As a circle with kanaka, ohana, and kaiaulu in the center of it, right? That's the piko, that's the center of everything. And the healing takes place around these things. And each area of healing then informs one another in a much more cyclical and overlapping way. And harm reduction, it's like a big hug around the whole thing because everyone's pathway looks different, right? Everyone's pathway into substance use is different, and then everyone's pathway out of substance use is different. So that's really, really important. And so just briefly, Mapuna Lab is doing some really great work with this Kanilehua framework, which includes this terminology that uplifts the Native Hawaiian worldview and provides clear linkages to Native epistemologies that value underrepresented narratives and experiences, as well as a visual and conceptual cohesion with Native Hawaiian health belief systems. And then some additional information on the newer version of Eola which provided a list of areas to kind of focus on for the way that we are going to address mental health and substance use. Oops, and this one is, oops, there we go. Sorry, looks like my spacing is all off, but so as we started to think about Eola Mau, and the recommendations, we realized that we can't sit and say how we're going to adjust these recommendations. We really need to go into the community to see how the community wants to adjust these situations. And so we did our phase one of Native Hawaiians and substance use virtual stakeholder meetings. We held one per island. We had a total of 77 participants representing 40 organizations and communities. And we looked at the top concerns, strengths, healing spaces that were available to Native Hawaiians on each island, the needs and gaps, professional development needs, and then next steps. And as we held these on each island, as we started our feedback process to those who participated in the original meetings, we realized that this was such an area that everybody wanted to continue talking about it. Substance use touches almost everyone's in our community's life in one way or another. And we need to figure out a way to really start to address it and bring it into a much more visible space. As historically within our culture, we may not necessarily take this kind of an issue outside of the family, right? But in today's kind of society, we need to figure out a way that our folks who are struggling with substance use are not struggling in silence, and that they can feel safe to talk about their needs and address the traumas that are impacting them in a way that makes sense to them. So we were able to move forward on phase 2 of our community listening sessions, this time in person. We got to dig in a little bit deeper and look at what cultural healing should look like, feel like, and sound like across the existing continuum, as well as what would it look like, feel like, and sound like, just in a perfect world. We also dug into various definitions of cultural foundations, cultural responsiveness, cultural safety, to identify how the community really sees these buzzwords that are thrown on and sometimes used interchangeably, but how does the community see these? And so that was something we highlighted in these reports. Here's just some images from the different meetings that we held. And then so what came of this is again, the way that cultural values and visibility, how we want to see that across the continuum of care, addressing needs and gaps, and supporting professional development pathways to create a Hawaiian culture-based continuum of care system. Our professional development area focused on this development of a multi-pronged long-term approach to really shift paradigms, right? Uplift skills, improve skills and knowledge in this area. So there's three stages within this professional development kind of rollout that we're looking at, engaging folks along the entire, I misspelled professional, yeah, mahalo, I'll fix that. And so we looked at, we want to engage folks along the entire continuum, right? Because this is the way that we get out of having this siloed system. The process, or the bulk of it, is going to focus on e ho'i ka piko, so returning to our center, right? Turning to how we understand ourselves, how we understand ourselves in relation to others and the world around us. So elevating homegrown cultural practitioners in this area, providing cultural safety training so that we create that culture of cultural safety, recognizing the value of cultural practitioners, connecting to Aina and a sense of place, and culturally focused cohort training for all types of addiction certifications for those who want to follow that pathway. And then we hope that as a product, we will start to see more successful outcomes, start to see this number dropping a little bit of those accessing services. Also create more cultural safety, so our Indigenous folks within the system that are offering services themselves feel heard, feel seen, feel valued. And then to improve cultural responsiveness across the board. And so I'll just read this executive summary because I know we're kind of running out of time, but this is our phase 2 kind of summary, but stakeholders described a Hawaiian system of care is one that requires a cultural approach to the entire system. The use of Hawaiian values across all definitions is cyclical and nonlinear, and outcomes that are culturally appropriate and make sense for diversity within the Native Hawaiian community. While each island lifted up varying degrees of what cultural ways of addressing substance use looks, sounds, and feels like within their communities overall, there are many similarities across the Pai'aina. In particular, the similarities showed up within the definitions provided for cultural foundations, cultural awareness, cultural safety, cultural responsiveness, and cultural resonance. Across all islands, Ike, Kupuna, and Aina were discussed as core to a Native Hawaiian system of care. This system of care also needs to reflect the values of Apu'uhonua and Ahupua'a, allowing Native Hawaiians to thrive in spaces of ancestral healing and abundance. These spaces give clients, ohana, community providers, and others an opportunity to forge needed pilina as a means of integrating services and collaborating across stakeholders. And so some of the products that came from these meetings, we looked to community to provide a definition of or how they saw harm reduction from a cultural lens. And this was a really difficult conversation for the community. So during our phase 2, we looked at the different siloed systems of the existing continuum of care, but also, again, like a broader look at how we wanted to see culture overall. So with the question that we asked folks about harm reduction, we collected that data and created a Huiana na Moku, which is a harm reduction toolkit for Native Hawaiian communities. And so this toolkit is actually massive. It's a bit more than a toolkit. I think maybe it's kind of a resource manual. So this is kind of still in draft form, and we've provided it, or we will provide some links to it for you in the chat very soon. And you can download it, take a look at it. Please feel free to provide feedback. So it provides looking at culture as a way to decrease or reduce the harm caused by colonization within our communities. And this mana'o comes from we were able to meet with First Nations Health Authority in Canada, who has done some incredible work in Indigenous harm reduction. And being able to talk with them about what they found in their communities really helped to shape what we wanted to provide for our communities here. This connection to culture, making it accessible for all Kanaka, and regardless of whether they use substances or not, right? So we took a long look at hula, right, and how hula affects our emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual kinds of approaches to health, right? It's a holistic kind of view. Hula can be that healing pathway for some folks. Oli can be that healing pathway. And so we also brought in some frameworks like Kukulu Kumohana, which is a well-being framework. And we provided principles and practices on an individual level, as well as an ohana and community level, to really use this framework for well-being from the lens of an individual, so someone who is currently using substances, or someone maybe in the family or community. So they want to be able to provide a healthy and nurturing space for their family community member. And so there's also some additional information and pop-outs here that is contained within it. We structured this with all of the cultural aspects up front very intentionally, because we want to ground ourselves in culture, right? And the healing that culture provides. And so that's how we kind of structured this. The information about additional types of substances is as toward the back of the resource manual. Here's some information about how we named this, Ehuiana Moku. It comes from an oli called Eihuana, which was a prophecy of Kupihe to Kamehameha. And so we really wanted to bring this information together in a way that united us, right? We're uniting ourselves through this practice. You can read more about that there. Here's just an example of like the section on oli is we have a video that folks can watch, a webinar that we talked to Kawila Kelly Ikanakaole, who provided a session on tiny ku'ahu and adjusting your inner hurricane and using oli to create a space of healing. So in this section, we've included oli. There's a few more pages that I didn't include here, but these oli cards, which actually are pop-outs, you can print them. We also print them and provide them usually when we do tabling, or if you're planning on doing like a training or something like that, you can ask us. But these are the oli that were haku by Kawila and his mother and gifted to Papolalokahi for this session. And this is a way to set your intention and grounding in the morning, how to awake your inner deity, how to ignite your inner flame. And so you can listen and learn to these oli. Here's an example of our hula pop-out section. So there's a section within the larger resource manual. There's also a pop-out here. This is a trifold that we also provide. And talks about hula, again, how it addresses all of these different areas. We have quotes from Kumuhula, and we also have some quotes from Haumana that have been connected with hula during incarceration, right? And how that has impacted their own healing. And then here is an example of our opioid overdose trifold, where it explains the steps to administering naloxone. It also provides a connection to Hawaii Health Harm Reduction that can, you can get a hold of them for a more in-depth training on naloxone, as well as go to them for distribution of naloxone. And then we do not have time for the full PDF, so I'm just gonna go ahead and go to this part, which is some of our projects, and I apologize, they're all separate links right now. They will hopefully be easily accessible via our website as soon as that goes live. But for now, I think most of them are in the chat here, but you can, once I send out these slides, you can also have their clickable links within here too. So we have the chapter from ADOD on our journal article, both included in here. State plan is here, the Journal of Health and Social Welfare is here. Continuing education is a playlist on substance use and how our cultural practitioners that work in the fields are providing services to their clients. So they include, we have a playlist of YouTubes that you can watch from our past webinars on this topic. And if you are interested in downloading a copy of the toolkit, you can fill out this form here to request a download. You'll get sent a link to download, and then a link as well that you can access all of the printable material. There's a lot of worksheets that accompany it, and there's a lot of different links to different ways to kind of connect to your own continued cultural learning. That was important for us to really provide a way that folks can connect to their own, what healing looks like for them. And so there's a lot of that in there. You can also watch our webinar, which is here at this link. This was a 2-hour webinar on the release of the toolkit. It goes into a little bit more depth. We're also working on in-depth trainings for each part of the toolkit that we are going to start offering to communities if they're interested. All of our trainings are, of course, free. And so if that's something that you might be interested in, please feel free to reach out to me as we continue to build those. Here's also another link for our phase 1 and phase 2 reports. And then actually, you might be able to hear all of my computer dinging all over the place right now. It's because I actually have a meeting that starts in just a little bit, but this is going to be our working group for Native Hawaiians and substance use. And so we've been holding this Native Hawaiians and substance use working group for the past year as Papolalokahi. And what we realized is that we really want to be able to connect more to folks, right? So we don't want to have even siloed folks doing different things within our own community. Like, we want to be able to work together to work smarter and not harder, right? We don't want to duplicate each other's work. We want to be able to uplift each other's work or contribute in a way that could create something that is more meaningful for the Native Hawaiian community. So if you're interested in joining this, we'll start this session. It's going to start at 11. It'll be from 11 to 1. Actually, probably start around 11:15. But you can go to this link to register. And this way, we're starting to build this pilina with Mapuna Lab. You'll see they're local here. And they've been doing a lot of cultural intervention training. And so we really wanted to join up with them to be able to support what they're doing and advocating for within ADAD as they advocate for the recognition and adherence to Senate Concurrent Resolution 103, which urged the inclusion of Native Hawaiian cultural intervention treatment programs, wellness plans, and holistic living systems of care in the state of Hawaii's response to the rise of misuse and abuse of opioids or illicit substances in Hawaii. So this Senate Concurrent Resolution passed back in 2019. So a lot of Mapuna Lab's advocacy work really focuses on making sure that folks remember that this passed in 2019, and how do we see this? How are we contributing to this uplifting within the system? So we've joined forces with them, and we're going to be hosting what is now going to be the working group 8 of the Hawaii Opioid Initiative. And I'm very excited because we have a lot of ability to kind of increase what we're doing and really reach more folks. And we can use folks that are passionate, that want to see change. So please, please, please join us. And then just a little information on our existing culturally responsive education and training that we currently provide. And then some more information on ones that we're working on that should be ready soon. And then I think that's it. Sorry, I know it went a little bit long. Does anyone have any questions?
Mahalo, Lilinoe. We do have someone who has their hand raised up. Oh, I guess not. But we do have a question in the Q&A feature. So mahalo nui for your great work and for sharing this powerful ahupua'a framework of health and healing. Question: beginning from a place of strength, since the passing of the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Improvement Act of 1988, what Native Hawaiian health outcomes have improved at present date that is supported by data? Over the same time period, what Native Hawaiian health outcomes have worsened and require more prioritized focus and resources?
That's a really good question. You know what, I don't think that I do not work in the data and research department, but that's a really good question. I haven't really taken a lens like that since the 88 Native Hawaiian Healthcare Improvement Act. Huh.
Something to think about.
I know, really something to think about. That seems like something that should be in this presentation. Mahalo for asking that question. I'm going to write it down so that I can include that next time. That would be very helpful.
We have another one. If we want to join on one of the future programs, especially the new nutrition chapters you are working on, how do they do that? So the link for the 11 o'clock session is in the chat. And then, yeah, how can they join future programs if they can't make the one at 11, for example?
Are you talking about the nutrition chapter in Eola Mau?
Yes.
Oh, that is also not me. That would be,
I can find out.
yeah, I think that's a Tertia question.
Yeah, I'm on the workforce chapter.
Yeah, if you're talking about future programs in substance use, then you can, if you want to email me that you want to be added to, or actually my email's on the screen, but if you are interested in other topics of substance use and mental health, then you can send an email to me and I'll add you to our substance use and mental health mailing list.
Okay, nutrition chapter, I'll find out.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have, I don't know about it. The new one. That's the update to Eola Mau that's happening right now.
Amy, can you send us your email address, please?
Any recommendations specific to settler colonial mental health providers such as myself? Yeah, I mean, mahalo for that question too. I appreciate that question actually. You know, we're working on that. I think that has a lot to do. First of all, you're here, so that's awesome. You know, I think that is already half the battle, right? Is recognizing that we sometimes have to do a little bit of some extra work, especially if we're providing services to folks that don't hold identities that hold identities different than the identities that we hold. I think one of the biggest things is hopefully, attending a lot of sessions like this. Mapuna Lab also does a lot of sessions as well. And we both are looking at creating, more ways to focus on cultural safety that can be brought into on different levels too, like within organizations, within providers that provide like private healthcare or private, therapy and things like that. So we hope to really be able to have more opportunities in that. We recognize this as a very big need. This is something that came to us also from the community, on multiple levels, right? And so as we continue to put out these trainings, I think we'll have several over the next year will be coming out that are going to be aimed at providing cultural safety. We'll be working on some projects to provide cultural training for all of the addiction certifications. We want to be able to provide these ways for folks to connect and continue to learn.
Cool.
Is there another question? What are some concrete examples of culturally focused interventions that are implemented in these workshops? So they are, I mean, I guess you could call those like Ho'oponopono is a practice, right? So that we wouldn't be taking like a Western frame of it in itself is a culturally grounded approach. So we wouldn't be like bringing in aspects of needing to create an intervention in a Western sense, if that makes sense. Is that kind of what you're asking? Like, what is the intervention? Like, what are the steps of the intervention within Ho'oponopono? Because yeah, we wouldn't. Ho'oponopono has existed, is a part of our foundations as a people. So we wouldn't be trying to make that fit into a cultural intervention box. If that hits if it didn't, then you can email me. Maybe we can talk more if I didn't understand your question, right? Oh, mahalo, aloha kamahana. Biggest challenges to getting cultural practitioner providers covered by health insurance. How can we help? That's another good question, actually. So, okay, actually, all these questions, if folks want to jump into the working group, these are the things like by the end of the working group session, we're trying to outline our tangible objectives and goals for the working group, right? And this is a working group now, which is a joint venture. So we really have the opportunity to like sky's the limit, right? Like through this kind of a working group, as folks want to contribute to this, like this is a Kākou thing, really. It's something that we all have to work on together. And I think that's a really important thing with insurance. I know that's been a hot button kind of issue in a lot of spaces, which we'll continue to look at and continue to address. And we'd love if you come into the working group and offer that mana'o too, so we can include it in our things to focus on throughout the next year.
Awesome. Mahalo. Lilinoe, thank you for joining us today. And I wonder if you could stop share. And we will send out the slides for everyone that registered, and then we'll also send out all the links if they're not already in her slides. Just an FYI, I also want to mahalo our intern that is actually sitting in and observing with us, Conan Wykes. And then also for our next webinar that's coming up on the 24th of March. So we have webinars every second and fourth Friday of the month, unless it's on a holiday, then that day's canceled. But the next one is on the 24th, and we have Dr. Malia Purdy, who is going to talk about Olelo Hawaii in healthcare, using Hawaiian language in healthcare. So stay tuned for an announcement on that. And I think it's time for a poi mochi donut. What do you think, Lilinoe?
I'm down.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Mahalo. Have a great weekend. Malama kikahi kikahi. And we'll keep in touch. Ahui ho.